When we come back, we're going to absolutely shred a couple of $1,000 worth of perfectly good tires.
That's why we had a tire sponsor.
Yeah. So you guys did the muscle car shootout, small block shootout, and those were like huge successes on Speed Channel.
Yeah, they were really good. So we were looking for other things to do, and we said, well, there were so many guys that were taking cool cars and then modifying them again. You had Mr. Norms, you had Royal Pontiac, you had Hurst, you had
Yenko.
Yenko,
Yeah.
you had Motion with Baldwin. So you had a lot of guys making them even better, and that's why we called it the Super Muscle Car Shootout.
Right. Was the Ford the only one that didn't go to someone, or is that that's a Shelby?
Yeah, and that's why we made it out like, you know, the really special cars were supposedly Shelby's in the day, even though they built, you know, a lot of them compared to the other brands there.
Right.
But we picked a super Cobra Jet drag pack car, which was top of the heap.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Were there any cars, like one comes to mind, were there any cars you think are missing from there?
Yeah. I mean, you always had a lot of guys hot rodding the cars brand new. Everybody talks about day one, day two type, you know, modifications. But these guys were really affiliated with certain makes and models.
Right. Okay. So these really make sense.
Yes.
There, welcome to another Dream Car Garage Muscle Car Shootout. Now, you know the format. We're going to use the 4 classic tests, 0 to 60, 60 to 0. We're going to do a quarter-mile test, and we're also going to send all of these cars through a slalom. We're going to use a device called TrackMate. Glenn Stevens from TrackMate is here. He'll take care of all of the timing to keep it simple and fair. But the real story here is the cars.
How about the Burnout contest?
We'll talk about the Burnout contest later.
You're right. The real story is the
tradition.
cars. We've got an AMC, a Rambler Scrambler prepared by Hurst. We've got a Super B 446 pack prepared by Mr. Norm. We've got a Baldwin Motion 427 Camaro. We've got a 69 Shelby GT500 Super Cobra Jet drag pack car. We've got a Royal Pontiac Ram Air 4 GTO, and we've got a Yenko Nova, rare car. This year, all the cars are 4-speeds. All right?
Yep.
All the cars have posies in them. All the cars have either 391, 410, or 411 rear ends in it. That's as close as we could get them. We tried to make it as even as possible. We even took them back to the shop.
Truth was, all that was coincidence. But Legendary Motorcar did go through the cars, made sure they had a tune-up, set the timing up, did a nut and bolt and road tested all of them, and Koki Coker provided us with all rubber that's all the same. So it's just about as even as it could.
Good thing we did that too, because one of the cars we had to find a substitute for, we actually had on a road test a motor go south, but it's better there than it is here.
True enough, but it would have been entertaining to see you blow a motor, spin in your own oil, and wipe out a $500,000 car just for a change.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. I wonder if the guy we borrowed the car from would think that's funny.
You'd use your pricing and you'd get top dollar. All that and a whole lot more with a brand new Muscle Car Shootout on Dream Car Garage.
So you guys took this one a lot more serious.
We got some hate mail.
Right.
So guys are, oh, you're automatics against 4-speeds. And, you know, I would say that the gear ratio, one was a 411 compared to a...
Oh, you were honest in the last one, but it wasn't necessarily as apples to apples as it could have been.
Right. So we tried hard on this one to get it relatively close. And same thing with the tires. I mean, we ran those cars. We didn't change tires on some of them, so it was important to all get a fresh set of tires because, you know, it's pretty important.
Yeah, it's super important.
You got 10-year-old tires that are hard as rocks, and other
Right.
guy has freshies on there, and, you know.
Right.
So we tried to appease the people watching it because we got a lot of hate mail.
Right. Like, yeah. Is there a car here when you just listed them all? Is there a car that in your mind goes, oh, that's going to win?
446 packs are pretty good. The Baldwin Motion cars were all really good. I didn't think the AMC would do much. And Ram Air 4 Pontiacs, I mean, they ran hard.
Right.
So they all had, you know, they were all pretty good. I would say that the AMC was the one that was kind of, it's not going to do much.
Like the old shootouts, you kind of just brought them in and ran them. Here you actually brought these cars back to the shop.
We brought them to the shop because a lot of these were not my cars. The first one was kind of what we pulled out of the showroom.
Right.
So that's why we didn't, you know, we didn't go through them. We didn't check gear ratios and automatics or, you know, we really didn't know any better.
Right.
And then this one here, we got guys that said, yeah, take my car. This will be really cool. And so we got a little bit fussier with gear ratios and transmissions and all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
The gold standard of all tests is the 0 to 60 test. It seems kind of simple. For bench racers, you basically take the lowest number and then all cars do that. But it's not always easy to repeat that number. So over the last 3 years, Peter's been doing this test again and again. You'd think you'd learn a little something, wouldn't you? Learn anything?
From you, I learned something every day. What not to do in
I'm talking
life.
about 0 to 60 now.
Oh, sorry. We did actually. And what we found is, unlike slicks, where if you reduce the tire pressures, you usually get a little bit better bite, with these bias ply tires, it seems that if you increase the tire pressure, you get a little bit more bite. The way to check it is to do a little bit of a burnout. If the outside of the burnout pattern is really dark, that means that you're underinflated. If the middle of the burnout pattern is really dark, that means you're overinflated. What we found is roughly 40 pounds is the right amount. So try it in your driveway. I'm certain your wife wouldn't mind, would you? If you did a little burnout in the driveway?
Your wife never minds.
No, she never minds. Try it in the driveway, about 40 pounds. Next time you're at the drag strip, I'm certain you're going to go a little faster.
Real scientific.
Do the burnout. Look at the tread pattern.
Burnout tire pressure test.
You know what was funny, though, is that was the advice. So we brought the guys that were running those cars. So some of those guys we borrowed the cars from were pretty sharp guys in the pure stock. So they understood the tire situation.
Right.
And they said, listen, run them, this way. So we actually followed their advice.
So it's legit.
They got those cars running really good on bias ply tires. Yeah.
About an hour from the CN Tower is Toronto Motorsports Park, an NHRA-sanctioned drag strip that's 50 years old. It's the site of our 0 to 60 and our quarter-mile tests.
So first one is 0 to 60.
It's interesting with this car is it's a brand new restoration, a real nice restoration. I'm not sure if it's been totally debugged. I'm having a few little problems. One, the shifter isn't quite 100%, and secondly, the car gets a lot of wheel hop. So we tried the first time doing a big burnout, and we got way too much wheel hop. It just got too much bite in the rubber. The second time we tried coming out a little bit easier, and it hooked better. So I think the second or third run will be best. All in all, hooks real well, but has a real wheel hop problem, this car.
When a driver runs out of talent at the drag strip, he normally blames it on wheel hop. See how Peter does with his Shelby.
I think that the fact that the horsepower to weight ratio on this car isn't that great, it's a fairly heavy car, it's not making a whole bunch of horsepower, helps with the launch. So in the 0 to 60 time, it's a heavy car, it's got the biggest tire of the bunch here. It's not hard to come off the line, you don't just instantly spin the tires. 0 to 60 might not be too bad, but I think it's gonna pay the price in the quarter mile.
Keep in mind that we're not giving Peter the times as he lays them down. Everything he's telling you is from the seat of his pants.
I'm impressed with this little car. I think the 0 to 60 times are gonna be great. I think it might be a sleeper in the quarter mile. The thing that makes this thing so easy to drive, it doesn't have huge amounts of horsepower or torque that just overwhelm the rear tires. It's pretty easy to get launched and hooked up. It's gonna be an impressive little car. First one was definitely the best one, had maybe 5 foot of wheel spin. Second one I tried with no wheel spin at all and it just fell flat on its face. Third one I just sucked, I spun it all the way up the track. First one's gonna be the winner in that one.
He's finally admitted it.
I think all in all, for a big heavy car, it hooks up real well out of the hole. Let's see what it's like with the quarter mile. By far the easiest car to hook up out of the hole. And again, I mean, the whole thing with these tires is if you can get the car hooked up, the quarter-mile time is going to be great. I think the 0 to 60 time is going to be awesome in this car.
And it was problems with getting the Yenko Nova to hook up which cost it so dearly in this test. Look at the range between all the cars. There's 0.7 of a second there, and that's an eternity in a 0 to 60 test. So when we look at the points the first time, the Yenko Nova's got a lot to make up.
So you're 0 to 60.
So there you go.
Did that surprise you at all, or pretty?
The Scrambler did.
Right. 5.8 seconds.
Right, but the Royal Pontiac and the Mr. Norm's cars, they were quick cars back in the day.
Right.
Yep.
And do you think if the Nova was a little bit more sorted, it would do better, or just they had wheel hop?
No, for sure. Because I mean, again, we borrowed cars from people, so some of these guys had them really dialed in well,
right,
and some weren't. And I remember we borrowed, I think, the Baldwin car and that Nova from a big collector, and they sat more in the showroom where the other guys were running the cars a little bit. So we went through it. I mean, they ran and drove good and everything, but they weren't, nobody had spent a weekend at the drag strip tuning it.
right.
Well, we've gotten to the part of the day where we're going to do a 60 to 0 braking test. And again, we're going to employ TrackMate to do that. So even a guy with a tiny little acumen and a very little bit of ability could pull this off. Now, the whole idea behind these cars is they're all a little bit different. We've got combinations of discs and drums. We've got different combinations on every car and a different weight in each car. So Peter's actually going to have to drive the actual car.
Tom stand there. He would stand anywhere, eh?
Oh, I give him credit. Can you slide it around me as I'm going around? Sure, I'll try. But he stood there, didn't flinch.
And be a hot dog about it, too.
I can't believe I missed you 2 years in a row.
Yeah. Here, have a
Must
mint.
be the wind.
Your breath stinks.
That's not my breath, buddy. Shake a leg.
Let's see if he gets away with this.
I'm kind of impressed with this car. I didn't think it would stop this well. It appears to be a big, heavy car, but I don't think it's as heavy as it looks, and nothing dramatic. The car stops pretty good. You have to steer it a little bit, but it certainly doesn't pitch you sideways. Nice, drivable car.
So the 60 to 0 test.
Right.
Is that because it was one of the things they were doing in the magazines at the time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They were accelerating brakes, slalom. That was a typical Motor Trend sort of deal that they would do.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And then were all these cars the same as far as discs and drums?
No. I think most of them had discs up front, but I think we'll go through that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you've got to admit, it's a lot more fun not to tell Peter the data as we collect it.
Well, the first time I hit the brakes, it got my attention, but I'm certain it got the cameraman's attention even more because I see him jumping out of the way. I guess what happened is the adjusters hadn't really set themselves yet, and it just wanted to swap ends, so a couple times I had to let off the brake just so it wouldn't come around on me. The next 2 times, it got a lot better, and it actually settled into stopping nice and straight. Light car, short wheelbase, brakes work real well on the car once they're set up. Seems like the vacuum booster isn't working real well, or we're just not making enough vacuum, and I'm not sure if it's hurting me or helping me. Obviously, I'm giving all the pedal pressure I can give, but the car really isn't wandering around at all, and maybe that's helping me a little bit in this case. I don't have to drive the car. I don't have to worry about the car getting pitched sideways. Car actually stops real nice and straight, no drama at all. Brakes work excellent in this car. We'll just see if it holds up. Well, this definitely was an exciting one to get woed down. I think the problem here is we got this great big motor up front, light little car, which as soon as you hit the brakes, the nose comes down hard, the back end goes up. It's got the drums out back. If they're not perfectly adjusted, it just wants to throw the car sideways.
Peter's road racing instincts make him think that the best way to stop a car like that is to throw it sideways.
Got to really drive this car. It's doable, but I don't know if it's going to be the fastest. It's interesting, both of the Chevys reacted exactly the same way under hard braking.
When you see all 6 cars tested back to back and watch what Peter has to do to get the most performance out of them, it's got to occur to you that the number really doesn't mean as much as the way the car behaves when you're trying to get it woed down. Look at the range between all of these cars. Once again, the Yenko Nova is really the longest stopping distance, but also had the most drama. Basically sideways, and who would have thought that the GT500...
So, I mean, I don't think anyone really gets too excited about a 60-0 test.
No, and the spread is basically 30 feet.
Right, pretty...
So, yeah, they're all pretty close.
Yep.
And I think that, it's just, how did you hit the brakes? Did you lock them up too early, later?
Right.
Did it turn on you? So it's pretty standard.
What do you want me to do here?
Well, you've done this about 5 or 6 times before in all the other shootouts, but the cool thing is, this time we're going to use track mates. So we'll be able to get your entry speed, your exit speed, your average speed, your top speed, your average G, your top G.
Time?
One of those things.
Are we going to measure time?
We can
Yeah,
measure
all that, and we're going to measure time.
We can measure time too. But one of those things are going to be consistent enough, we'll be able to make you look good.
Is this your idea of a joke?
It's just a little
Very funny, very
Just a little
funny.
reminder, you're always calling me a pylon. Now you get to be one. Second of all, don't beat yourself up.
What does that mean? I'm not going to hit one of those,
You always
especially
do.
myself.
You always do, and that's expensive hardware out there.
Not going to happen.
It's gonna happen.
When you think about it, after 9 years of Dream Car Garage and the fact that Peter drives a muscle car hard in virtually every episode, probably is no better driver to take these cars through a slalom course, which they were definitely not meant to do.
This car is a handful to drive. It's tight and everything, but I can't believe the steering box has got to be like a 20-to-1 ratio. I'm just sawing at it one way and the other way. So the last time I tried actually just coming as close to the pylons and trying not to get too radical, I don't think this is going to be a real fast car through the slalom, but we'll see.
Cone number 1 goes down as Peter has a real workout getting this Shelby to change directions.
Oh my goodness.
A little bit of body roll.
For a big, heavy car, I'm kind of impressed how this thing went through the pylons. Again, second gear seems to work a lot better than first. The thing that I didn't like about the car, even though it's got power steering and only 2 of the cars here have power steering, it's a little bit sloppy, which was a traditional Ford trait in '69. But it sure helps when you're going through there. You can almost one-hand it as opposed to having to use 2 hands. Be interesting to see what the times are like.
We might be making history here. This could be the first time one of these cars has ever been tested through a bunch of pylons.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is a fun little car. I can't believe how well this car handles. Every one of these AMCs I've driven before just didn't work very well. Whoever rebuilt this car did a great job in the front end. The first time I went through in first gear, it was just too much on and off the throttle. It would just spin the car a little too much. The second and third time I tried it in second gear, and it works really nice in second gear. All in all, I'm impressed with this little car. You know, it's got a little E70 tire on the car. Impressive.
At this point, Peter doesn't know it, but virtually everybody at the track is cheering for the Nova. Surely it'll do better in this test.
Oh, wide there.
Yeah.
If nothing else, it's always fun to take one of these little cars through the pylons or the slalom. What's interesting is 4 of these cars have no power steering, and it's not that it's that bad. What happens is you just have to almost let go of the wheel, catch it, because you can't steer it back fast enough. And the one time I missed it and I hit the pylon, but I think that's still the fastest run in the bunch.
Pylon number 2.
got some body roll on that.
This has got to be the closest steering box I've ever driven in a Camaro. I don't know what Joel Rosen did, but it works in this car. It's almost too close to ratio. It's got to be a 12-to-1 box or something in this. Maybe got it out of a Corvette or who knows what, but I'll tell you, it's impressive on turn-in. It's got so much power when you get on the gas as well that it just wants to slide the back end around. First time I was blown away how quick it turned in. The second time I got used to it, kind of a little smoother. Third time I tried powering through as well. Second or third time is going to be the fastest, but I'm impressed. Maybe it's just I'm coming from one car that, you know, doesn't have a close ratio box, and this car does, but I'm impressed how this car turns in.
Pylon number 3.
Let's face it, none of these cars were really designed to go through a slalom course. I was actually pleasantly surprised how the car worked. I expect it to be worse, but I still think it's going to be the slowest. And a lot of guys will argue with me, but that torsion bar suspension just doesn't work as well, probably because it's never really been developed. You know, some of the other cars were in the Trans Am series and that, so they had more developed front ends in the car. It worked better than I thought it would, but I don't think it's going to be good enough to really get up high on the points here.
Surprise, Pete. The Dodge Super Bee is actually not so bad, and it's the poor Nova that actually takes the brunt of this one. At 35.98 miles an hour, the Camaro is very good, but it's not that much better than the Shelby and the GTO. So it's tightening up.
So the Camaro, the Baldwin Motion Camaro is actually the best.
I think just because of the steering box.
Because of how quick the steering box was. Because, yeah, the cones looks crazy tight.
Yeah.
And with a big ratio, you're going to have
You just can't turn it quick enough.
Right.
Yep. And again, pretty close. You know, you look at the mile an hour difference, they're not far off
No, from
each other.
down to the Novas.
Yeah.
Under 4 mile an hour.
Yeah.
If it isn't 100-degree temperatures, it's going to be 100-mile-an-hour winds straight ahead of us. We're driving into this.
Every Cub Scout knows that a straight-out flag means gale force wind, so we're probably not going to set any records here. But as long as the wind blows all day, you'll be all right for...
You were in Cub Scouts?
Yeah, I was in Cub Scouts. What were you into? Beavers?
Well, you start, up here you start actually in Beavers and then you go to Cub Scouts.
Yeah, the beaver uniform was just not for me. But
I don't think any uniform that size would be for you.
I made the Cub Scout uniform look good. And then turned into this. So anyway, we've got the track mate going. We're not going to rely on the system here at Toronto Motorsports Park. Glenn Stevens is not only be able to give us an ET, mile an hour, but we'll also look at three-quarter track, half track, and a whole bunch of data so that we can see how these cars perform, not just out of the hole and at the end, but all the way through.
The other thing, too, that we learned from doing this over the last couple of years is with these cars, forget dropping the clutch at 3,000 RPM or even 2,000 RPM, the tires won't hook up. The guys from Fast and the guys from Pure Stock have taught us now that you almost come off the line on idle and then get after the pedal and make sure it doesn't spin.
So the whole idea is to give each of these cars the best shot possible, and unfortunately, we have to rely on him.
Now, you've got to wonder what excuse he's going to come up with this time about why the Nova didn't work out here. Once again, all of us at the track are rooting for this car. Please, Pete, make it do something.
The car feels plenty quick. It's making enough horsepower. The problem here is just getting the car hooked up. It just has incredible amounts of wheel hop. I don't know if the springs need to be clamped or if it's a different type of spring, but every single gear, the thing just gives incredible wheel hop. This car could go a lot faster than it's running today. Problem is the rear suspension. You know, I gotta thank Kevin giving us a car that's just freshly restored. But the problem is the car hasn't been dialed in yet. The rear suspension just can't hook up all the horsepower.
Quarter mile is the big test.
Sure.
Yeah.
Makes sense. This kind of seat of the pants opinion of Peter has been proved wrong before. Let's see how this Shelby actually works out.
Comes out of the hole, it hooks fine. it just doesn't have the same sort of horsepower as the big block Chevys or some of the other cars out there. Real respectable, heavy car, not quite enough horsepower, hooks fine, works good, just that's all it's got. Makes all sorts of horsepower. It hooks up a lot better than the Nova does, but still doesn't hook up quite as good as some of the other cars. It just feels like it can spin the tires. Second gear, if I power shift it, it just lights up the tires again. This car's got all sorts of power, just need to try and hook it up a little bit better.
Was the Camaro the only car that had
Track bars?
Yeah, the most aggressive like front bite as far as track bar setup type thing?
Yeah, so I think it was the only one that had traction bars from, Joel Rosen
Right.
back in the day. But a couple of the other cars were very much dialed in for drag racing. Like I remember that that Pontiac was really dialed in
Right.
for the drag racing. It didn't have bars, but it probably had some spring work, or it just hooked up really. It was dialed in.
Right.
Yeah.
This car is such a surprise. The first time I spun the tires too much. The second time it just hooked out of the hole really nice. This car is a surprisingly fast little car, and I don't think it's because it makes a whole bunch of horsepower or torque. Well, it makes a fair bit of torque, but the thing is it just comes off the line so nice if you get it just right. If you miss, you're gonna spin the tires, but a couple times I got it right, it just hooks up nicely.
Every single Mopar enthusiast in North America is holding their breath right now. And we're hoping the best for this Mopar as well.
We're gonna find out, but I think this car definitely has the best 60-foot times. This car comes out of the hole really hard, but it just doesn't seem to want to pull as hard on the top end as some of the other cars. But I'll tell you, maybe it's a little bit like the Shelby, where they're coming out of the hole hard, but they're just heavier cars than the rest and just not enough motor to pull the big, heavy extra weight down the rest of the quarter mile.
Was the Super B kind of the most, like they take the car from the factory and then the most stripped down version?
Yeah, that's the blacked out wheels and
Lift off
hood with the springs and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, they were trying to make a drag car, but they were trying to make a cheap drag car.
Right.
Yeah, so it was a combination of both things.
All in all, though, I bet you 60-foot times this is going to be the fastest.
Oh.
That car was dialed in.
Yeah, it came off the line like hooked up.
This car has been dialed in perfectly. Like I said, when it's 0 to 60, the car just hooks up, it launches, it goes. The Rambler 4 motors making all sorts of horsepower. Nice package, good running car.
So the Super B turns out to be absolutely awesome out of the hole. It's the Pontiac GTO that comes up with the best ET and almost the best mile an hour.
So, I mean, that's crazy close. You're 106 miles an hour, but 13.0 and 13.4, the Baldwin motion car.
Right. So basically, the Baldwin car had a better mile an hour.
Right.
So it just didn't get it off the line as good.
Yeah. But everything's close other than the Super Cobra Jet car.
The Shelby. Yep.
Why do you think?
I mean,
it looks heavy.
It is heavier. They call it a drag pack car. It's just got an oil cooler on it. It was nothing special. It was a Cobra Jet 335 horsepower motor.
Like not comparable to a Baldwin motion.
No.
Yeah.
It was sort of the least, well, the Hurst Ols, but the least modified by somebody.
Right.
It was really a production car.
Right. Okay. So you after the first muscle car shootout, you had to have a good running Dodge.
Oh yeah,
You
for
guys
sure.
got a
We
lot of hate mail
lambasted
from the
after that
CUDA.
one.
And the Yenko Nova, albeit not in the basement, is pretty darn close. So when you add up the points, it's the Pontiac GTO, the Camaro, and the Dodge Super B on top of the chart, and I'll be darned if Peter wasn't right about the Shelby. When we come back, we're going to absolutely shred a couple of $1,000s worth of perfectly good tires.
That's why we had a tire sponsor.
Yeah, to all the tires.
It wasn't really about making it even. It was more about we had to give back the cars with their tires back on or
Right.
the shredded tires.
Right, because you had to do the burnout competition.
Yeah.
Everywhere I go, somebody always mentions Peter and the big smoky Burnout done in a car that costs more than a house.
Well, it's kind of become a dream car trademark, hasn't it?
It has for you.
And think about it. As long as the tires are spinning hard, there's no load on the motor. As long as they're not hooked up, you can't hurt anything.
So we always incorporate a Burnout contest at the end of the muscle car shootout. You can do the arithmetic if you don't like it, but we do it because we write the rules.
Just giggling to yourself. Holy cow.
I think I grabbed another gear.
That's a good burnout.
Now, watch the wheel hop that Peter's been talking about. When the Super Muscle Car Shootout returns, we'll add up all the points and declare a winner.
Well, I'd say all those did a pretty
Pretty good burnout.
Pretty good burnout. Wow. And is that, you think that's also, like, compared to looking back at the muscle car shootout, the first one you did, is it because of brand new tires as well?
Probably. Yeah, I didn't.
They're
even
big
think of
and
that.
smoky?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice soft rubber.
Yeah. And so everyone giving you their car, they knew you were going to do that at the end.
100%. I was shocked when we did the show how many people would give us cars to just abuse, and they were loving it.
I mean, I guess they knew, like, your core business, you could fix it if
100%.
If you hurt
it
the
crashed the car.
Yeah.
But we kind of made it clear to them, listen, we're gonna do burnouts. We're gonna beat the tar out of it. It's no different. I mean, the cars should be able to go to a drag strip, do 3 or 4 passes, do a couple 0 to 60s, and do a couple burnouts.
Yeah, fair enough.
Car can't do that. It's kind of disappointing.
Yep.
Yep.
No, absolutely.
We're back to wrap it all up, and we have to start with the Burnout competition. How do you score that? Good job, by the way.
Awesome burnouts, but
Really
I'm
good.
not going to score it. I'm not going to be the Russian judge. You can be the Russian judge. Let's
Great.
just give them all the same.
We'll give them all zeros then.
Yeah, sure.
Fair enough.
As usual in a muscle car shootout, there's some disappointments and there's some real surprises.
A little disappointed in the Yenko Nova.
It had the potential to win. I thought it would, but you know what? Fresh restoration, tons of wheel hop, 2 weeks of debugging it, it would have done better.
Or we could have got a better driver. The Scrambler was a neat car, fast car, did pretty darn well, but just had too much competition, I think. Shelby and the Super B tie at 14 points, which is...
Shelby I thought was going to do better, but it was not downright slow, but it still ran a 14 flat, but just tough competition.
And who'd have thought it would be the one to stop the quickest? Then the Camaro, we expected big things from that.
Yeah, and it performed great. It's just this car outperformed it.
It performed it awesome.
Well, Milt Shornack, who built the cars originally, said, watch out for this car, it's going to fool you, and it sure did. The Rambler 4 makes tons of horsepower. It's a tweaked car. You know, Pontiac's Royal Bobcat deal, nice deal.
That makes them even more expensive. Write to us, tell us what you'd like to see us do in the next Dream Car Garage shootout. Maybe
a North American, European tour, and you can drive the European cars and I'll drive the North American cars.
Then it's a lock. The European cars will win. We'll see you next time in the next shootout.
So your analysis of this now, you think obviously the GTO is strong, but you think a big factor was how well the car was set up.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you think if you know it was real apples to apples, the Baldwin motion car would maybe win?
There'd be a good chance. I mean, those Royal Pontiacs really work good.
Mm-hmm.
And the Rambler 4 is an underrated motor, but a big block Chevy is still a big block Chevy, and you know they work really good, and they're easy to make a lot of power.
Right.
Yeah.
What you know, these are all obviously, you know, rare, significant cars. What car here is the most desirable today or brings the most money?
A real Baldwin motion Camaro, depending what stage it was.
Right.
So if it was ordered through Baldwin and went to motion, because there's a big difference between motion cars and then Baldwin motion cars.
Understood, yeah.
Anybody could take any car at any point to motion, but if you ordered it through Baldwin and said, this is what I want,
right,
then they shipped it to motion and they did the car kind of for Baldwin. And then, so you ordered the car from the dealership like this.
right.
So yeah, that would be, I would say, easily the most expensive car. And then probably the Yenko Nova next. So the two Chevys.
Yep.
Yep. You know, and then you'd have a toss up between the Super Cobra jet car and the Rambler 4.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Now, say like as a teenager and you're into, you know, quarter mile stuff and obviously muscle car stuff. Were you aware of all these cars, or is it more when you got into the business, these kind of super rare muscle cars?
For sure, it was more when I got into the business.
Right.
The like a lot of that stuff, you would see it in, you would have heard of it. You'd
Right.
see it in the magazines, but you'd never see it.
Right. Right. Because no one had them.
Right. Nobody had the cars.
No kids had them, anyways.
No. And I think that a lot of those cars were tweaked again for those tests. You know, those tests were no better than our test, and you had the manufacturer and you know the hot rod guy like Motion making sure that the one they tested really worked.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That makes sense. So I think this was this the last shootout you guys did?
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was.
Right. So did you? What was the response from this one? And again, 2006. It wasn't on social media.
No,
You were
it's
getting
20 years ago.
You were getting emails.
We were getting emails, and that was so funny. You know, you talk about cancel culture today.
Yeah.
Well, nobody could cancel you because they were just sending the emails
to you.
to us. and they weren't all corresponding and going, yeah, that guy was an asshole. You should have had this or whatever.
Right.
So it was kind of interesting. But we could feel when we did something wrong, we got backlash. It was entertaining.
Right.
Yeah.
So this one, did you get any hate mail, or was it, like, I think you set it up as fairly as you could have?
For sure. We tried really hard. You know, the couple guys commented on how can you do a slalom test when half the cars don't have power steering, which is a valid point.
Yeah.
But other than that, it was, people got to understand too, we were having fun. It wasn't, you know, a scientific test that we're really trying to.
Right.
You know,
right.
it's pretty random.
Sure. And I mean, it's tough to, well, I guess some people still do it, but tough to write in and complain when someone just produced like the coolest thing that you really wanted to see of all these super muscle cars, you know, it's
and beating the tar out of them.
yeah.
Yeah. Like we were kind of the first guys to really, like those cars were valuable cars already then.
Right.
And what year did you say this was?
06.
06. So yeah, that was the run up kind of to the crash.
To the peak,
almost.
yeah.
Yeah, to the peak. So those cars were a lot of money for 20 years ago almost.
Right. So the Baldwin motion car would have been the most expensive car then.
Yeah, I mean they were hundreds of thousands. Like a lot of those cars were hundreds of thousands of dollars. So they weren't cheap cars.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
No, thanks for going over this with me.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. It brings back memories. It was so much fun doing it. And I mean, Tom, he was just one of those guys. He would always have a comment, but he was funny as hell. And it was a lot of fun doing those.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.